All right, welcome to another exciting day of the Environment and Transportation Committee. While we are waiting for our chair to come back from, I believe, a press conference, we'll go ahead and get started because I know we have some very important people with us today. Our first bill for today is by Delegate Charkoudian, House Bill 345, and you can bring up your panel along with the county executive if you'd like.
Chair. Okay. I'm going to grab a chair. So we'll be on the next panel. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Okay, you've got that. You good? Yep, thank you. Yeah. There you go. Rico. Okay. We'll be together. Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, for the record, Delegate Lori Charkoudian requesting a favorable report on House Bill 345. I want to highlight, this is a bill to make sure that we can build more solar in the state to address our need for more energy generation in the state, to address the need to bring rates down, and to address our climate goals. And I want to talk about a couple of things that are key to the way that this bill works to accomplish that. The first thing that this bill does is related to our renewable portfolio standard. In 2004, a couple of you were here in 2004. I'm not sure, most of us were not. In 2004, this body passed a renewable portfolio standard. And what we essentially did is we told ratepayers, we are going to collect money from you, and that money is going to go towards building new clean energy. That might be solar in the state, it might be wind in the next state over, it might be wind in this state, but that was the promise that we made to ratepayers, that the money that we're collecting from you is going towards our renewable portfolio standard, and it is going to build clean energy. Since then, because of problems within the market, the amount that our ratepayers are paying in alternative compliance payments instead of in renewable energy credits has ballooned. And that money gets transferred out of the renewable portfolio standard and into budgets that then get used for a host of things. And some of those things are great and some of those things are not so great. But what this bill does is it says money that we're collecting from ratepayers for the renewable portfolio standards stays in the renewable portfolio standard and is used directly to make sure we're building new clean energy. So that's the alternative compliance payments portion of this bill. And that becomes really important because we need to build new clean energy, and we can't do it by increasing costs to ratepayers any more than what they're already paying. And so that gets to the second part of the bill. We've had a solar carve-out in our RPS for a number of years now. We grew it in 2019. We increased it to 14.5%. And pretty much every year since 2019, the solar industry has had to come back and say, well, this part's not quite working and that part's not quite working. And we've had to make all of these adjustments until finally in 2024, the solar industry said, well, you know, none of this is working for us, and we need to basically significantly increase the alternative compliance payments. And that was the Brighter Tomorrow Act in 2024. And many of us were uncomfortable with the Brighter Tomorrow Act. We agreed that we needed to do something to keep the industry growing in the state. We didn't think the Brighter Tomorrow Act quite had it right, but we had to do something quickly. And at that time, we made a commitment to ourselves and to the solar industries and to the climate movement and to the ratepayers that Brighter Tomorrow was going to be a short-term solution, and that we would come back and we would reform the RPS so that it worked for ratepayers, so that we got the lowest cost possible for ratepayers, and we continued to build solar energy in the state. And so soon after the 2024 session, I began meeting with the solar industries. And we probably, the solar industries and I and others, advocacy groups and labor unions and the Public Service Commission and the Maryland Energy Administration, we probably have met for, I don't know, like 200 hours. So I want to thank the folks who really put the time in. And that's because the solar industry includes a lot of different market segments. And each of those market segments has something that they would prefer as the way that that we do on RPS in the state. And what this represents is the consensus of all of those folks working together in an agreement of how we can continue to grow solar, get the best bang for the buck, and do it without costing ratepayers any more than what is already on their bill. And so the way it does that is we have the Brighter Tomorrow Act, which phases out at the end of 2027. So this bill picks up at the beginning of 2028. And it does two things. For utility scale solar, it uses a competitive procurement process. That process will make sure that we're getting the lowest cost possible and still getting those solar projects built. For distributed solar, because you don't want to have every single rooftop bidding into a competitive procurement process, that would be an administrative burden that none of us want to set up, we have administratively determined RECs so that the PSC can adjust the RECs over time depending on what's happening at the federal government, in the market, in supply chains. They may go up or down to make sure, again, that each segment of the industry gets exactly what's needed to build, but not a penny more. And that nuanced different levels of pricing is the best bang for the buck for our ratepayers, and it makes sure that we're also getting solar built in the state. This model is based on a couple of different states. It looks most closely like New Jersey. It also, New York has administratively determined RECs. Delaware has something similar. Illinois has something similar. So we learned a lot from our neighboring states. I spent a lot of time in conversations with those states, their public service commissions, their staff, as well as other experts on this area, and it led to the bill that you see in front of you. Here's the most important thing about this bill. There was an analysis that we didn't get until this weekend, so it should be in your inbox, even though it's not in my filing. The Public Service Commission, who I also want to shout out as having spent an extraordinary amount of time working with me on this bill to make sure we have something that's workable for them, did an analysis that essentially looked at if we move this bill as it's currently structured, so the administratively determined incentives, the competitive procurement, and we keep the ACPs in the RPS, as they were intended, those monies collected for the RPS stay in the RPS, then we expect that this bill will get a lot more solar built with no additional cost to ratepayers. And that's the analysis that's in your inboxes. I'm happy to talk more about that, or the Public Service Commission can talk more about that as well. A couple other things that the bill does. It authorizes balcony solar, which you might have heard of. Utah authorized balcony solar. It's a way of taking really small scale systems, putting them out on a, like a tenant in a apartment complex can stick it out on a balcony, hence the name balcony solar, and generate enough to like offset, their refrigerator usage or something like that. So it's a nice addition, has an equity element to it. It fixes our prevailing wage laws as it relates to the utility scale solar that we built. I want to mention one other thing, because you're going to hear from REC traders, that's renewable energy credit traders, that they oppose this bill. They oppose the bill. First, I just want to mention that many of them were invited to be part of the collaborative process that we built. So we did listen to them and listen to their perspective throughout the process. But because this bill moves towards a competitive procurement and away from a REC-based process, their position, well, they're essentially cut out of the ability to make money off of trading RECs from Maryland ratepayers. And so while I appreciate that that is their business model and they want to have REC markets so that they can make money off those REC markets, as Maryland legislators, it's our job certainly to listen to them, and we did, but it is our job to do what is best for Maryland ratepayers, to do what is best for the Maryland climate, for Maryland clean air, and this bill really balances all of the pieces to make sure we get the solar built and we do it in a way that's best for ratepayers. And so that's what you see in front of you. And my panel has more specific experiences in each of those areas, and so now I'm going to turn it over to them. Who did I say was next? You're next. Yeah.
Environment and Transportation Committee, good afternoon. My name is Robin Dutta. I'm the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association, here to speak favorably for HB 345. We've had the pleasure of working with Delegate Charkoudian on this, really going back to almost right after the Brighter Tomorrow Act was passed. As we said several years ago, there, it's a bridge. It's a bridge to a new program because this is a different industry than when the SREC market was created 20 years ago, and Maryland's needs are also different than 20 years ago. There's a need for a lot more energy, and that energy is happening during the day, which very thankfully, solar projects are able to generate quite well during the day, and when paired with battery storage, can be an even better grid resource. So the purpose of this bill is to, without adding to the ratepayer burden, improve market predictability, to improve confidence for the customer in the value proposition, and to improve the whole process to make sure that there can be more solar built in Maryland. I want to highlight also that CHESA represents the entire industry, from the mom and pop residential shop to the utility scale developer. And so we've come with that perspective and have been able to support this bill because of the compromise and the work and the input from our members. It's a broad consensus. It's not unanimity. That is not, I don't think any industry, gets to have that except in the most extreme circumstances. But we think that this is best for the industry, and the bill models the work that the industry has led in other states. I personally have been a lead advocate in Illinois, and New Jersey, and Massachusetts, where these administratively determined incentives in slightly different structures have been implemented and have worked quite well. That allows for better value, for better experience for the companies installing, and then also better for the customers. We urge a favorable report on HB 345. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's nice to meet everybody, a new committee. I am Laurel Peltier, and I chair Energy Advocates, and I want to introduce what we do. We're a large coalition of agencies, nonprofits, volunteers, and foundations, and we live to reduce low-income families' bills. And we work from policy, we do reporting, we're at the PSC level, and we're also out in the field. We are right now in a fabulous pilot with DSS, doing critical medical needs, helping all of your constituents who are sick and elderly, and they need to talk to someone on the phone to get energy assistance. It has been a great collaboration. What this bill does is, ratepayers are getting pummeled. We know that across the board. And that RPS has been funding for 2 decades what's supposed to be the renewable portfolio standard. That ratepayer money comes out of every single kilowatt hour of supply that all ratepayers pay, low income, middle income, and high income. And we've made a promise as a state that that is renewable portfolio standard funding. And as simple as this is, that should go to RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard Channels. This bill says RPS money that ratepayers are funding should go to RPS projects. And to finish this off, are there a lot of solutions in the short term? No. But green local solar power on a low-income household is free energy after a while, and it will lower someone's bill so that they can actually keep their power on. So this is a terrific bill, and our advocates and we all favorably support this. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I'm Howard County Executive Calvin Ball, and it's my honor to be before you to testify in support of this legislation. I want to begin by thanking Delegate Charkoudian and Senator Brooks for leading this clean energy charge with this legislation. In Howard County, we're proud to set and achieve ambitious goals, and climate action is no exception. Our Climate Forward Climate Action and Resiliency Plan sets goals to reduce greenhouse gases and achieve net zero emissions by 2045. And we know that clean energy is vital in order to meet these ambitious goals, and it is now imperative for states and local jurisdictions to facilitate clean energy deployment. In 2020, we signed the largest power purchase agreement in the state of Maryland at the time, which now generates more than half of the electricity consumed by Howard County government buildings. And solar energy in Howard County has increased by 23% during just this past year, which equates to approximately 150 megawatts of solar installed countywide. And that's enough power to power about 16,000 homes and is expected to save county approximately $30 million. Implementing more solar power and achieving energy independence doesn't have to be complicated and costly. In fact, this plug-in technology has opened the possibility for more middle and lower income households, especially renters, to utilize solar energy without major costs. Now is the time to ensure that clean energy transition does not leave out our vulnerable communities. Adopting HB 345 is a simple yet transformative way to democratize solar. And for these reasons, I respectfully request your favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. County Executive, for being here with us. I was going to give you some extra time, but you were right on, even a little short. You may continue.
Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair Guyton, Environment and Transportation Committee members, thank you. This is also my first time in front of ENT, so thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. My name is Rico Albuquerque. I'm an employee and member of IBEW Local 24. We represent more than 3,000 electrical workers from Frederick to Ocean City, and I'm here to speak about the men and women who will be working on these projects. Like Vice Chair Charkoudian said, we worked on the Brighter Tomorrow Act 2 years ago. We were very proud of the work that we did on that, and I think this body should be proud of the bill that you passed. It wasn't perfect. It did have some holes. Some of that was in the enforcement of prevailing wage laws on solar projects. For us, we are interested in this bill because it incentivizes more solar to be built here in Maryland, which we know is the quickest and easiest way to get energy on the grid, and it closes some of those loopholes, some of the problems with enforcement from the Brighter Tomorrow Act. So I know that the General Assembly cares about energy, cares about the environment, cares about Maryland's workers, and we feel that HB 345 is the best way to move this industry forward for the stakeholders and for the men and women who work on these projects. For those reasons, we urge a favorable report on the Affordable Solar Act, HB 345. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I believe you have several other favorable, and they've all shifted spots while I wasn't looking. So you may begin with when you're ready.
Yes. Members of the House Environment and Transportation Committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide favorable testimony on House Bill 345, also known as the Affordable Solar Act. I'm Leah Meredith, the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director of the Solar Energy Industries Association, or SEIA. Founded in 1974, SEIA is the National Trade Association for the Solar and Storage Industries. We work with our 1,200 member companies, as well as other strategic partners to shape fair market rules that promote competition for the growth of reliable, low-cost energy storage and solar power. When Maryland first enacted its RPS 20 years ago, it was a powerful tool in jump-starting the renewable energy generation industry in the state. And last year alone, the solar industry invested more than $547 million in private capital into the state. However, the policies that have created that success are now riddled with administrative and cost efficiencies to the detriment of Maryland ratepayers and bringing new solar businesses to the state. As Delegate Charkoudian astutely mentioned, this proposal would improve Maryland's return on investment on the solar that is installed in the state of Maryland. Under current law, Maryland utilities that do not meet the necessary RPS requirements must pay what's known as alternative compliance penalty, or ACP. According to the Maryland Public Service Commission, in 2024, Maryland energy consumers paid $365 million in ACPs. What this means is that Maryland ratepayer dollars are being funneled away from directly investing in new generation and towards paying these compliance penalties. The Affordable Solar Act would address this shortcoming in the RPS by following similar reforms already implemented in New Jersey, as well as New York, Illinois, and Massachusetts, to provide new administrative pathways for linking in-state electric consumption with in-state electricity generation. Another shortcoming of the Maryland RPS that this addresses is attracting more large-scale, utility-scale solar projects. Those are the projects that are cheapest sources of new electricity generation in the United States and is the source of new electricity generation that can come online the fastest. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I respectfully urge a favorable report. I look forward to any questions.
Thank you so much, Leah.
Hello, Vice Chair Guyton, members of the committee. I'm Brittany Baker, and I'm the Maryland Director of Chesapeake Climate Action Network. I just want to emphasize that this is our #1 priority for this year. This essential piece of legislation is the permanent fix that Maryland needs to expand deployment of solar energy, reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state, stabilize the solar industry in the face of federal antagonism, and ensure that the solar industry provides family-sustaining jobs for Maryland residents. Further, this bill protects ratepayer funds that are collected from the Renewable Portfolio Standard to ensure those investments are used for the Renewable Portfolio Standard. Solar energy projects provide the cheapest electrons and are the quickest to build projects that we can add to the grid. As everyone has emphasized, increasing solar puts downward pressure on rates. I want to give a shout out to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo for the excellent briefings that he set up for the committee earlier in the year. And on January 29th, the chair of the California Energy Commission left something important with us. He said, in order to build a grid that is resilient and maximizes clean energy resources, Maryland needs to follow California's lead, follow Texas's lead, and commit to long-term programs that meet the need of the clean energy industry and protect ratepayers. This legislation is targeted and long-term, and it meets the needs of the moment. Thank you. I request a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Adam Dubitsky. I'm the Maryland State Director of the Land and Liberty Coalition. We are a center-right renewable energy advocacy organization focused on property rights, expanding local economic opportunity, enhancing energy security, and also American energy independence, and I'm here in support of HB 345. HB 345 is not about expanding or weakening Maryland's renewable portfolio standard. It does not change our clean energy targets. It addresses a simpler fundamental issue, and that is money collected from ratepayers for a specific purpose should only be used for that purpose. More broadly, when government collects funds for a stated purpose, it should not be those funds should not be repurposed later. Gas funds fund roads, 911 fees fund emergency response, pension contributions fund pensions, and the RPS funds should fund the RPS. The Strategic Energy Investment Fund is funded largely through mandatory charges on electric bills tied to RPS compliance. They're not voluntary payments, and they are not general tax revenue. They are purpose-bound ratepayer fees. Under current law, the S allows SEEF alternative compliance payment ratepayer dollars to be spent on broadly defined energy-related purpose. That standard is too vague. It invites mission creep and turns the RPS ratepayer funds into a backdoor funding source that avoids normal budget scrutiny. If the state wants to fund other energy programs, it should do so transparently through the general fund, not by shifting funds onto electric bills or using SEEF RPS ratepayer funds to supplant tax dollar funding of energy programs and calling it a record investment. Finally, this bill tells investors and companies that Maryland is a predictable, disciplined state and is safe for long-term capital investment and expansion. States that honor their own funding rules attract investment, they attract business and jobs. Those that don't. For these reasons, I respectfully urge a favorable report on HB 345, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Kump?
Go ahead. Okay. Yep. Madam Vice Chair, distinguished delegates, I'm Phil Reynolds. I'm speaking for Patrick Crump and representing the Maryland Episcopal Policy Network. I'm happily joined by two parishioners from St. Anne's who come with support of this. We strongly support HB 345, the Affordable Solar Act. We believe that clean and safe and renewable energy is necessary to preserve God's creation and God's people. Our church has passed numerous resolutions limiting fossil fuel and supporting clean energy future. The church is committed to environmental justice with specific concerns for reducing economic impacts on the lower income communities. We support the this act for three reasons. First, it establishes a target of 4,000 megawatts of solar capacity to the grid by 2035. Second, it protects funding, as has been mentioned, it protects funding for renewable energy projects from being diverted to cover Maryland's deficit. Third, it extends access to incentives for affordable renewable energy to renters. And it adds, by adding a solar renewable energy credit for portable solar energy generating systems, often referred to as solar, balcony solar. This legislation furthers economic justice by offering opportunities for renters to generate electricity and benefit from credits. The Maryland Episcopal Policy Network supports this Solar Act and to strengthen Maryland's solar renewable energy credit program in a way that lowers energy costs and accelerates the state's transition to clean energy and promotes environmental justice. The Maryland Episcopal Public Policy Network requests a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contributions, Mr. Reynolds. We have one favorable on virtual, I believe. So let me double check that. And that is Ms. Sky Richmond. Are you with us?
Hello, good morning.
Terrific. You can begin whenever you like.
Hello, my name is Sky Richmond. I'm representing the nonprofit Bright Saver. We are the first and only nonprofit single-mindedly focused on the plug-in solar adoption in the United States, and I am testifying to encourage the committee to support HB 345 and to specifically allow the people of Maryland to access balcony or plug-in solar and take control of their rising energy bills. Plug-in solar systems reduce the amount of electricity households must purchase from utilities and is available to homeowners, renters, and condo dwellers alike, ensuring clean energy access and its associated savings is not limited by housing status. When paired with batteries, plug-in solar systems provide resiliency during outages, and the accessible adoption of clean energy technology will reduce pollution and deliver public health benefits at no public costs. Most importantly, we support the bill as written because it ensures plug-in solar systems are safe for consumers and the grid. Systems installed according to the safety standards cited in the bill will not shock users, overload circuits, or backfeed during a power outage, which protects our line workers or anyone working on a multi-unit building. Maryland will be joining a national plug-in solar movement. Already 25 states have introduced this legislation and more are expected to do so. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? It looks like we do. Let me move first to our subcommittee chair, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate, for the bill. I have a series of questions I just wanted to go through really quickly. And also thank you, Brittany, for the shout out. I do want to make it clear that the committee staff and a lot of folks helped to put those briefings together. So while I thank you for the shout out, I'm giving a shout out back. Thanks, Mike, and everybody else. Okay, so a couple things I wanted to touch on. The escrow account, can you talk in a little bit more detail about that, how that differs from what we're doing now? Because it seems like it's like kind of a lock. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I can. And I actually, if I could just say one other thing, big picture, which is there are significant amendments coming. We had reached consensus as a group. The draft that came back didn't fully reflect that. And so everyone who has testified has seen those amendments and intent. So I'm saying that now just because it's worthwhile to know that, but also because it may make some things like the escrow account clearer. So I think if you think about what happens now, money is collected on the utility side of things, right, from ratepayers by utilities, and then right now those ACPs get transferred over here, right, into the CEF where they're used for all kinds of things. And the idea would be, instead of that transfer happening, you would just keep them over here in so utilities, sort of collect the money, put it in the escrow, and then it goes out the door to pay for the solar that gets built under this.
Okay. The prevailing wage aspect, can you tell me, like, what are we trying to accomplish with that Brighter Tomorrow kind of maybe didn't get right? Can you go into a tiny bit more detail about that?
Well, I think so whenever
3,000 electricians is a lot of electricians, so I think that's an important piece.
Yes, there's more than 3,000. I think this one local has 3,000, the other local has a bunch of thousands, and the other local has a bunch of hundreds. I don't know the numbers, that's on my head.
A lot.
Maybe so. Anyways, there's a lot.
A lot of good jobs.
I think whenever we're investing Marylanders' money, whether that's taxpayer money or ratepayer money, we really need to look at are we creating good family-sustaining jobs? And I think there's been concerns sometimes that when we do these big projects, you might have people coming in from out of state, so that the projects aren't necessarily adding to the Maryland economy. And so that's not the case with all projects, but you have sort of better actors and worse actors in any industry. And so the idea is, in this industry, we want to make sure that any money that is invested is creating family-sustaining jobs, and generally that's going to be for Maryland workers, and then that's going to have all the other implications of like the multiplier effect that benefits local communities. When we did the Brighter Tomorrow Act, we acknowledged that and we put in the requirement to do a prevailing wage. What we've learned since then is that the way that that was written, the Department of Labor doesn't have the ability, or believe they don't have the ability to enforce it the way it was written. And so we spent a good bit of time with them sort of rewriting that section so that they believe that they can enforce it the way that it's written in the bill now.
Okay, and lastly, you mentioned balcony solar. And so just to make it clear, is there a lot of hardware that's needed, or you can just kind of go out and buy basic solar panels with a 120 and plug it into your home and reverse? Like, how does that work? Yes.
So, yeah, so unlike...
I'm trying here, Delegate.
So when you're doing a sort of larger solar array, you have, electricians who come to your house, people put on your roof, like connect it to the grid. And generally, when you have it on your roof, it is sort of backflowing onto the grid. You have net metering of some sort, whatever it is we end up deciding to do with that law. But you have that flow, sort of on an ongoing basis back and forth with the grid. With balcony solar, generally, you're talking about like 1 panel, 2 panels. You buy them at IKEA. You stick it on your balcony. You plug it into a standard outlet. It's a small enough scale. There's a bunch of safety requirements that come with the bill. It has to meet the UL requirements. So it still has to meet safety requirements, but it's small enough scale that it's generally considered to like offset maybe your refrigerator as opposed to all of the electricity use in your house. So it gives some relief to ratepayers, but it's a small enough scale that it has the ability to sort of be plugged in without having to go with a full array on a roof.
So it's kind of like you're using your own wiring system in your house before the meter, before it gets anywhere.
Correct.
And you're allowing people to charge devices or maybe their refrigerator or something like that without it actually going out into the grid.
Right.
And which basically means that's one less electron you have to import if you don't have anything, because you're using your own electron at the source.
Very well said, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Committee Chair, Subcommittee Chair.
Thank you. Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much. And Delegate, thank you for this bill. It's really interesting. This is all new subject matter for us, so I do. The question I have is based on the fiscal note, and I want to give you the opportunity to respond.
I appreciate that.
We have such a large deficit, and the fiscal note says it's going to take money out of the general fund, and the flexibility of the general fund, it actually could go back in the budget, wherever the general fund sets it, but, and so that the priorities of the state are set in the general fund in general.
Yeah.
In general, they are.
So
the question is, at this time, when we're under this great fiscal pressure, what is the best argument in favor of taking that money and investing it in this way at this moment?
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I also would just say there's elements of the fiscal note that won't be accurate anymore once we put the amendments into place. So but this one will be accurate. And I take issue with the way that the fiscal note writer writes it, because what they say is we're taking money from the general fund and moving it into this. In fact, the general fund is taking money from ratepayers and moving it into the general fund. And that's the crux of what I think is absolutely inappropriate for us to do. It was one thing when we were talking about a small, like, used to be there was maybe 10 million a year that was coming over into the general fund from ratepayers. 1 year when things were tight in the market, and then the next year no money would come over, and then the next year 20,000 would come, and then the next year nothing. And so when you were talking about that kind of thing, it made sense to say, okay, ACPs can go from ratepayers into the general fund, and maybe you create a solar grant with it or something good that comes out of it. We've now reached a point where the alternative compliance payments were close to $360-something, right, $1 million. It is no longer acceptable to take that money from ratepayers, put it in a general fund, even if it's going to wonderful stuff in the general fund. Heat pumps, I love it, right? Solar, community solar, I love it. But it's not appropriate for us to say to ratepayers, you're paying money to the RPS, and then take that money and not actually spend it on the RPS, but put it over here in the general fund. So it is true that the money that used to be in the general fund from alternative compliance payments will no longer be there. But I would contend it was never appropriate for us to use that money for at that scale for whatever we wanted in the general fund, and certainly not for, it has been balancing our budget. It's been transferred out of there and balancing our budget. And so no matter what fiscal straits we're in, we shouldn't be balancing our budget off of ratepayers who are struggling to pay their bills. The second thing that it references that would take from the general fund, there is a section of the bill that I'm actually not married to. I put it in there. It was so basically data centers that are larger than 100 megawatt data centers, a portion of their, basically the taxes that they pay on energy, the sales and franchise tax on energy, a portion of that would go into this fund to offset, to buy new solar. I had set that up because I wasn't sure when I wrote the bill if the ACPs would fully offset the cost, and so I thought that would be another way to offset the cost to ratepayers. It turns out the ACPs do fully offset the cost, so we don't necessarily need that, but if we wanted some of the revenue from the state that we're getting from data centers to go towards clean energy, we could keep that portion of the bill in. I could go either way on that, but that's the second thing that the fiscal note is referencing. And I should say right now the state is not seeing any of that money because we don't yet have data centers larger than 100 megawatts online paying that tax yet. So it's not like it would be money that we're seeing that would go here instead. It would be money that we're not seeing yet, but in a few years we would be seeing when those data centers are online.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I mean, this is something that happens often when we set up special funds across every agency.
Yep.
And one of the things, a long time ago when I was on Ways and Means, one of my jobs was to monitor the all these special funds and tell people, don't let the money accumulate because in tough times it'll get swept into the general fund. Use it or lose it, and because it should not just be sitting there, not doing anything for anybody. If it's not being used for the purpose, for any reason. Sometimes things can't be used for the purpose for which they were collected because of certain technical things have changed since the law was written. It shouldn't sit there. They should either reduce the rate so that they use what they take in, or they let it go for something else.
Isn't that so, Delegate Healy?
So I'm saying,
okay.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
But I think, do you see a way that this bill will encourage the actual use of the money for those purposes, rather than letting it accumulate in a fund someplace?
Yeah. So what this bill does is it says the money's collected over here in the RPS from ratepayers, put in the RPS, it stays over here. And then the other thing the bill does is it creates this procurement for solar. So now the money is sitting here, and that's the money we spend on the solar procurement. So it never pops over here into the C funds where it becomes tempting. It's like the lead me not into temptation bill, you can think of it that way, where it becomes tempting to then use it for these other sources.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate, thank you for bringing this to our attention. One question reading your bill that we seem to have a problem with on the lower shore is getting the solar current that's being generated there now off the eastern shore. And I'm aware of cases where they are just burning up the electricity somewhere on the grid in the lower shore because they can't transport that current north to you. And we're even having problems where the voltage in some of our residential lines is getting too high and affecting some of the heating and cooling systems on the homes because of the excessive solar current that's being generated in that small area. And I just wonder if you would talk to the grid provider, or I understand that this is affordability, but could we target this to an area that it could be better utilized than placing more in an area that's already excessive by the grid provider's terms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's sort of two answers to it. One is, generally what will happen when a solar developer is looking at the state and thinking about where they want to interconnect, part of what they'll have to do is go through an interconnection study at PJM. And we know that the study takes too dang long, but part of what that study does is it says, can this area take more solar, right? Like, are there upgrades we need to make to the transmission lines before we put more solar there? And so that's what the study does. And so PJM looks at the area, they look at the transmission lines, and they say, if we're going to put more solar here, then this solar developer actually needs to upgrade the transmission lines so that it can carry the solar in the directions that it needs to go. So that's the first thing. So what ends up happening then, just in a market-based solution, is that it'll become more costly for a solar developer to continue to build in an area that already has enough solar, and so the market will sort of drive them to build in the areas that don't have as much solar, right? Because it'll be less expensive in terms of transmission upgrades. But the second thing that sort of changes the calculus of all of it that's really exciting is that last year we passed a bill to increase storage on our grid. And once storage is on the grid, the storage will actually, the market will drive the storage in the places where there is excess solar, right? Because that's where there's the best bang for the buck for the solar, for the storage. And so then once you have storage on the grid, solar and storage together are going to continue to drive prices down, because now you've got sort of more round-the-clock kind of cheaper energy happening in those areas. So I think that the combination of where the solar will be incentivized to go based on just the transmission grid in this bill, plus as last year's bill to drive storage across the state comes online, you'll start to see more of a sort of evening of some of those things.
For the gentleman from Howard County, would you have a number of how many acres of utility solar you have in Howard County?
No, I'm sorry, but I can get that to the committee.
Or what percentage that may be of your county that has utility solar? I'd be interested in that.
I'll get that information.
Thank you.
Thank you, delegates.
Thank you. Since I see no more questions for this panel, we do have a favorable with amendments. Delegate Charkoudian, I want to give you the opportunity, since you did mention that there were amendments to this bill that you would accept. We're about to hear from the Public Service Commission. Yeah. Or is she going to address the amendments that you have already agreed to? Or
our amendments are 100% online together. Yes, okay. Yeah, we've been writing them together, and I'm in favor of everything they're about to tell you.
All right, that's very helpful information as we go into this next witness. Thank you so much. Ms. Santiago Mosier.
All right. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Guyton and members of the committee. It's lovely to be with you this afternoon. My name is Melanie Santiago Mosier, and I serve as a commission advisor with the Public Service Commission. Chair Barve regrets that he's not able to join us today. I'm pleased to offer the Commission's testimony in support of House Bill 345 with the amendments that Delegate Charkoudian mentioned. We've submitted Chair Barve's written testimony, so I'll keep my verbal remarks brief for you today. With the sponsor's amendments, House Bill 345 offers stability for Maryland's solar development landscape by having the Public Service Commission oversee the procurement of solar renewable energy certificates on a forward-going basis. This bill represents a fundamental change in Maryland's solar policy. It significantly expands the Commission's role with regard to how solar is developed, financed, and procured. With the necessary personnel and resources for consulting, as amended, House Bill 345 is a bill that the Commission can implement. The bill essentially creates 3 new programs for the Commission to do. First, a program for the competitive procurement of utility-scale solar. Second, a program for the procurement of distributed scale resources where we would determine prices for those solar renewable energy certificates. And then third, a program to ensure that solar facilities built before these new programs take effect can still sell their solar renewable energy certificates at the level of the alternative compliance payment for that year. Critically, the bill creates the new escrow account, which Delegate Fraser-Hidalgo asked about, and that would serve as the platform for purchasing solar renewable energy certificates under the new programs, but also the escrow account would be designated as the repository for alternative compliance payments under the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, as well as a portion of the franchise taxes attributable to large energy users. The bill envisions that these funds would be used to purchase the new solar renewable energy certificates under the new programs. So in thinking about this new escrow account, we conducted an initial analysis of potential ratepayer impacts, and we had rough ballpark estimates. Our estimates are based on a range of assumptions and publicly available data and should not be considered precise projections. But what we found is, under a scenario in which alternative compliance payments for Tier 1 resources continue to flow into Maryland at the high rates that we've seen for the last 2 years, and under a scenario in which those funds are sequestered into the new escrow account, it is possible that for the next 4 to 5 years or so, those funds will offset the cost of purchasing solar renewable energy credits and result in a neutral impact to ratepayers. So again, we support the bill with amendments offered by the sponsor and look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for this witness? No, all right. Well, we have several unfavorable witnesses as well. So I'd like to call up Mr. Ayers, Fiastro, Castelli, and Sims. And if we can fit at the table, Mr. Schottinger. And then we have one virtual witness. Or you gentlemen can trade off whenever you want.
Thank you to the committee, Bill Castelli on behalf of Solar Landscape, a commercial and industrial rooftop company. And with me today is Mark Schottinger, the Chief Legal Officer and President of Solar Landscape, and David Simmons, the Vice President of Markets and Policy. And it is with reluctance that we're here opposed to the bill. This is a very important bill for the solar industry. But we do feel that we need to call out attention in particular to the bill's impact to commercial rooftop solar. You've heard a little bit about the impact of solar and how quick it is to get to the grid. I can tell you there is no segment of the solar industry that is quicker to get to the grid than commercial and rooftop solar for reasons that they will outline. And at a time when we are faced with kind of the energy emergency that we are in, speed is what is ultimately going to save taxpayers, ratepayers, the most money. So with that, I'm just going to say, you know, you've heard a little bit about federal rules, the chilling effect. We just want to make sure that this legislation doesn't have a chilling effect on commercial rooftop solar. And I'll have Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And committee members, I'm Mark Schottinger. I'm President and Chief Legal Officer and one of the owners of Solar Landscape. Solar Landscape is the biggest commercial and industrial rooftop solar developer in Maryland. We have 85 projects currently. They're all participating in the community solar program, and we would love to be developing many more projects here in the years to come. And with that in mind, I'm here to talk about the Affordable Solar Act. We really appreciate the dialogue that we've had with the bill's sponsor. We really appreciate the intent of the bill, but unfortunately we're up here in opposition to the bill because it would create financial uncertainty around how our projects get compensated that would cause us to have to stall development of new projects here in Maryland. That's a problem for ratepayers because our projects save ratepayers a lot of money. The reason they save ratepayers a lot of money is because they go really fast. We connect them at the distribution level with the local utility, not through the PJM. We have zero local opposition to our projects. They're effectively invisible on top of these rooftops. There's no environmental issues, and we can put hundreds of megawatts of these projects online very quickly. The Brattle Group recently published a report quantifying the value of that speed during this energy crisis and concluded that ratepayers here in Maryland would save $300 million from this kind of project in the coming 5 years if we're able to continue doing this kind of project in the coming 5 years. The Assembly also recognized the value of these projects in the Brighter Tomorrow Act in 2024, and our concern is that this bill would reverse course on that and cause us to have to really stall development of new projects in the coming years. We think there are amendments that could fix this, and we're open to continuing the dialogue. Thank you.
Chair Corman, members of the committee, thank you very much. It's good to see you all again. My name is David Simmons, also testifying on behalf of Solar Landscape. The reason we're here today is because we are worried, as Mark said, about the uncertainty this bill might produce for the commercial and industrial rooftop solar market going forward. We've had the pleasure of speaking with nearly every member of the committee, and we heard a lot of favorable voices in support of the commercial and industrial rooftop solar segment, and assume that you don't want this to have this effect going forward. Just to talk about what that might look like, practically speaking, if we were to start a project today, that project might very well not come online until 2028. But to move forward, we need to get that project financed now. And our financing parties are going to need certainty on both, one, which incentive framework is going to apply, and two, how much the projects are going to get compensated. Unfortunately, the current construct of the bill would not provide answers on either of those two questions. And when financing parties don't have that certainty, they either assume the worst or they walk away entirely. And when projects can't get financed, they can't get built, even if the roof, the customer, and the need for power are all there. In addition, as Mark mentioned, the Brighter Tomorrow multiplier, there's separate legislation this session that would extend and expand the Brighter Tomorrow multiplier, which this legislation would have the effect of eliminating entirely. Now, we don't think that this legislation, we know this legislation is not meant to have any chilling effect on the commercial and industrial rooftop solar segment, but unfortunately, as written, we think that very well might be what happens. And so we wanted to recommend some potential tweaks that could change things. One is to create an explicit floor for REC compensation going forward for commercial industrial rooftop solar projects. And the second is to enable projects under the new RECs to still get the Brighter Tomorrow multiplier. We look forward to having constructive conversations with the sponsor and the rest of the committee, and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. John Fiastro here on behalf of my client, the Maryland Renewable Energy Credit Aggregators Coalition. Want to let the committee know that the coalition supports the intent here of solar development and more solar development in Maryland. And that is a goal that this committee and this General Assembly for 20 years now has established and maintained. But one of the points that was made earlier was that ACP dollars are a shortfall or a shortcoming of the existing RPS. That's exactly right. And what this bill does, it doesn't necessarily fix the underlying problem of the RPS. The RPS is chronically sick. ACPs are a symptom of a chronically sick RPS. Ratepayers should not be paying for renewable energy that is not steel in ground. And that's exactly what the ACP is. So what we should be doing is focusing on more of these funds actually going to projects through the established mechanism that the General Assembly has established, the RPS itself. So the legislature should focus on repairing the RPS, strengthening the RPS, and our goal should be an RPS that reliably delivers renewable generation. One thing that I'm unclear on here as I read the bill is the regulatory lag. Now, the bill purports to bring forward new generation, but really, I don't see given a promulgation of new regs, an RFP, time for developers to submit responses, orders, it could be 2 years before we see that. So there are faster ways that these funds could be disposed. MEA is very strong at delivering grant programs, and we could see a structured reverse auction that could quickly get dollars out the door and more quickly see steel in the ground developing domestic Maryland-based solar projects. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks to the committee. My name is Ian Ayers. I'm president of RECMIT. We work directly with more than 1,500 Maryland households and small businesses that have invested their own money in rooftop solar. Ultimately, we streamline the REC selling process for households, and we see this market operate day to day. We share the goal of the bill, getting more clean energy built in Maryland while keeping costs affordable for families and ratepayers. I want to make three quick points. First, the urgency behind this bill has changed. Solar development did indeed slow in 2023, but since the Brighter Tomorrow Act took effect in July of 2024, we've seen renewed activity, better participation, and uptick in installs. Plus, we have the Renewable Certainty Act from 2025 that has made siting projects easier. Those reforms are starting to work and spur new investment in Maryland. Second, HB 345 is a slow and complex response. This framework would not meaningfully deliver new generation till at least 2028, and it requires building new administrative systems. From our experience in Maryland, even modest program updates take real time. New programs, especially large, complex ones involving systems, people, software, et cetera, almost always take longer and cost more than expected. Third, in this era of affordability, centralized price setting is the wrong direction. Open markets let competition find the right price over time, and centralized procurement risks lock ratepayers into higher costs and reduce flexibility. So respectfully, now is not the right time, and this is not the right framework. We urge an unfavorable report on HB 345. Thank you.
Question from Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask a question of the bill's sponsor? I think she's still here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wanting to ask Solar Landscape, does your company operate in any other jurisdiction or state that has a similar kind of bill, and how is it working?
Mark, do you want to answer this one?
Thanks for the question. We do. So we're the biggest in the country at doing commercial industrial rooftops. So we're in a number of different markets. We're headquartered in New Jersey. We have well over 50% of the market share there. We do projects in Illinois, here in Maryland, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and we develop projects in Northern Virginia as well. What was your other question besides where else we are?
How is it working for you?
Solar generally, like our business generally?
Yes.
It's good. We actually, dealt with, as the sponsor of the bill mentioned, we lived through the transition of the REC program in New Jersey to an administratively determined REC, and there's a lot of good things about that, as she said. I think our concern right now is that I think everybody's aware there's changes in the federal government that have basically made a race to try to turn on as much solar as we can in the coming 5 years. And the unintended consequence right now of the way the bill is drafted is that there would be this window of time over the next couple of years where we wouldn't know what the REC value is. And the way our business works is I have to go out and lease roofs from real estate owners, and I can't quote them a price for a roof lease with a straight face if I don't know what the incentives are. And then we finance the projects, and I can't get a financing party to finance the project if they don't understand what the economics are. So there's this sort of window where we need to get some certainty over what the RECs will be, so that we're not just left guessing. Because if we have to guess, we can't lease the roofs, we can't finance the projects don't happen, and then the ratepayers don't save the money from the projects.
If you could give us later in something written on how it works in those jurisdictions and how it won't work here, we would appreciate that. Later.
We can do that, and I think we do have some pretty concise ideas, I think, about how to make it work here.
That's what we're looking for. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think this is for John and Ian. Both of you described how this would take a long time to implement and how there's things you could do faster. Do those things have to be mutually exclusive? I mean, the ACP money is going to continue to come into the CEF. We're going to hear a lot about that probably in this committee and on the floor and through the budget. So couldn't we do some of those short-term things? You mentioned reverse auction, John. I think the governor's bill has grants. Couldn't we do those things in the short term while setting up a new SREC market in the long term?
I think that, could you do it as time passes? Sure, you could establish that. Like I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to. The question is, what is preferred? And I think what you've heard in testimony is that finding that strike price between buyer and seller is a more efficient way to develop and retire RECs. It has worked for a long time, and so really, my suggestion, Mr. Chair, is really working on the RPS itself. We did not design an RPS to have hundreds of millions of dollars of ACP payments on an annual basis. There are several levers that this committee could adjust in order to fix that. One, it could raise the ACP. That would make Maryland is particularly for Tier 1 RECs, more competitive with states that now have higher ACPs than ours, Pennsylvania and New Jersey primarily. And it would encourage renewable energy generators to bring those RECs here and retire. I would much rather, as a ratepayer, pay for a REC than an ACP. I think the delegate does make a good point that once an ACP is paid for, the current statutory construct provides a lot of flexibility to Maryland Energy Administration, and they are allowed to dispose of those funds in a variety of different things, and we do not necessarily have something really to show for it after that time. If you look at compliance year 23 and 24, there was combined over $650 million in ACP. And that is, Mr. Chairman, that's flawed. It's a symptom of a sick RPS, and we should fix that and have developers be able to meet with buyers of their RECs and come up with strong financial packages.
Okay, it's hard for me to hear it's worked for a long time with it's a sick RPS. I'm not sure how those two things go together, but that's okay. We can follow up. I appreciate it. Any further questions? Okay, thank you to this panel. We do have a virtual unfavorable witness we can call up, Caleb Einwechter. I apologize for messing up your name. Please go ahead, sir.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Caleb Einwechter. I'm Manager for Renewables at SREC Trade. We manage over 24,000 solar assets in Maryland and work directly with more than 40 solar installation companies. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in opposition to HB 345 today. I want to acknowledge that although we all want to address affordability and build rates, the solar industry isn't fully aligned on this topic. So I'd like to make 2 quick points. First, HB 345 creates a substantial new financial exposure by requiring long-term fixed payments for 4,000 megawatts of new solar projects without a clear cap on total program costs. Developers would receive 15 years of guaranteed SREC 2 revenues, shifting risk away from project owners and directly onto Maryland customers. Even the bill's so-called 5% net bill impact is not a firm limit because it allows projected future benefits to count against real immediate customer costs. And with the state exempt from financial responsibility, any procurement errors, price spikes, or overruns would fall directly on ratepayers, enforced through a new non-bypassable surcharge on all customers. Second, since the passage of the Brighter Tomorrow Act, Maryland has already seen improved project economics and stronger solar growth, driven by higher SREC values and market-based price transparency. HB 345 puts that momentum at risk. By replacing a tradable REC market with fixed incentive blocks and without defining those block values, the bill reduces transparency and flexibility. A similar model in New Jersey did lead to a steep decline in solar deployment, with build rates in 2023 and 2024-2025 falling to less than half of 2022 levels. Maryland risks repeating that outcome, just as our market is gaining traction under Brighter Tomorrow. In closing, Maryland cannot afford to adopt a bill that potentially increases ratepayer costs, introduces uncertainty, and could slow the growth of solar at a critical moment. For these reasons, we respectfully urge an unfavorable report on HB 345. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. I do not see any questions. That concludes the bill here on House Bill 345. We'll now turn to House Bill 66. Delegate Chisholm, welcome back. Environment, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative withdrawal. And if you have a panel or anything, please bring them up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the ENT Committee, it's good to be back for my weekly hearing here in ENT. For the record, I'm Delegate Brian Chisholm, here to present House Bill 66, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative withdrawal. HB 66 requires the governor to withdraw the state from participating in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. This bill comes down to one basic question. Can Maryland families still afford to keep the lights on? For too many people, the answer is no. At a time when households are already struggling with groceries, housing, and childcare, unaffordable electricity and heating costs are pushing too many families to the breaking point. We can still protect the environment without bankrupting families. This bill begins to remove policies that artificially drive up energy prices and puts affordability, reliability, and common sense back at the center of our energy decisions. Families certainly didn't cause this crisis, but they are certainly paying for it. Critics of the legislation will say our participation in RGGI helps reduce net CO2. The claimed benefit of RGGI is theoretical, regional, and uncertain, and it's described best in a couple recent research papers that indicate that CO2 reductions in RGGI states are not meaningfully different from national trends, suggesting that RGGI has not produced additional measurable emission reductions beyond those already occurring. When RGGI caps emissions inside few states, it then rises outside of that region, but electricity flows freely across state lines. This is considered leakage. Carbon doesn't stop at the state line and check in at the welcome sign. Analysis by Thomas Jefferson Institute found that after Virginia joined RGGI, total CO2 associated with electricity consumption in Virginia increased by 3.7 million tons in 2 years because in-state generation declined, higher emitting imported electricity surged, and in our case here in Maryland, we already import 40% of our power. We import the emissions and we export the jobs and reliability. We often turn to states like Pennsylvania, who has 15 coal plants, and West Virginia, who have 8 coal plants currently running, to make up that loss. That's like squeezing one side of a balloon and claiming it shrank. Emissions don't disappear, they just moved across the state line. Most destructive, Maryland ratepayers are getting stuck picking up the enormous tab. Recent data shows RGGI states consistently rank among the highest electricity prices in the country. Non-RGGI neighboring states often pay less. The bottom line is ratepayers are certain and immediate, or ratepayer costs are certain and immediate. Climate benefits are uncertain and disputed. At best, RGGI doesn't eliminate emission, it relocates them while guaranteeing higher costs for our Maryland families. Critics will also claim RGGI funds are helping low-income families through SEEF funds. This is where the program really falls apart, especially now. The Strategic Energy Investment Fund is largely funded by RGGI proceeds. SEEF was established as an energy investment fund to improve energy efficiency, lower bills, and strengthen reliability. Whatever the intended purpose, Maryland energy market is clearly not efficient, not affordable, or reliable at this point. More disturbing is what they've done with these funds as of late. A public report by the Maryland Energy Administration showed a SEEF balance of just over $1 billion as of July of 2025. It has now been rated repeatedly. The projected balance in the governor's latest budget is $164 million. That's over $840 million out of the funds in 2 years. That's not investment, that's a shell game. These funds have been repurposed far beyond their intended mission, becoming a slush fund for the governor, special interest, nonprofits, and government pilot programs. If this were truly about protecting vulnerable families, the fund wouldn't be nearly empty. The best way to help families who are drowning in energy costs is to stop participating in programs like RGGI. They take dollar from ratepayers today and promise dimes tomorrow. Marylanders can't pay their bills with future predictions. They need relief now. Leaving RGGI doesn't end regulation, it ends self-inflicted harm. Here's the bottom line. Marylanders are being treated like an ATM, and RGGI SEEF dollars are ratepayer dollars, but they're being used to balance budgets. Reliability is getting worse, emissions are simply getting exported, and the money gets spent on patching holes in the governor's budget. That is not environmental leadership, that is fiscal and energy malpractice. For those reasons, I respectfully ask for a favorable report on HB 66. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alex Pavlak. I'm a PhD engineer from Smyrna Park and the chairman of the Future of Energy Initiative. My advocacy is numbers. A year ago, January, I published the first of 3 op-eds in the Baltimore Sun urging Maryland to withdraw from RGGI. Maryland's response to me has been happy talk. I've been told that RGGI is working just fine, and in a sense it is. It's working exactly as planned, and it's raising tons of money. I've been told that Maryland fossil fuel plants are retiring for economic reasons from the state of Maryland, and that is also true. RGGI imposes a $275 million a year tax on Maryland's $600 million a year fossil fuel industry. Maryland fossil fuel plants cannot afford to pay that tax and compete with PJM plants that do not pay that tax. This is not complicated. RGGI is bad policy because taxing boundaries do not align with market boundaries for PJM RGGI states. RGGI caused the Brandon Shores early retirement and was a factor in last year's Howard County blackout. RGGI caused natural gas plants to file for early deactivation in 2024. This was reversed by exceptional PJM market prices that were big enough to allow the fossil fuel plants to pay the RGGI tax and stay in business. RGGI ratepayers get the bill. RGGI is increasing, not decreasing, regional greenhouse gas emissions. It is not a climate policy, it is a taxing policy. Maryland's withdrawal from RGGI can be staged over several years, coordinated with PJM auctions. If FERC terminates RGGI, the impact would be disruptive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jake Marabato. I serve as Senior Director of Policy at the American Legislative Exchange Council. Thank you for the opportunity to provide informational-only testimony and to share ALEC's nonpartisan research as you consider HB 66, which would withdraw Maryland from the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI. Today, there are 10 states, including Maryland, that participate in the RGGI cap-and-trade program, either in statute or through agency rulemaking. Programs like RGGI ultimately amount to a carbon tax that is passed down to consumers and businesses in the form of higher retail energy prices and impacts the energy sources needed to ensure a reliable grid. In Maryland alone, it is estimated that RGGI contributed to at least over 3,000 megawatts of dispatchable power being forced into retirement, enough energy to power millions of homes statewide. ALEC's research highlights the stark difference between states that participate in RGGI and those that do not. Our annual energy affordability report ranks all 50 states on the weighted average cost of electricity and studies the link between energy prices and state policy. Maryland ranked 39 out of 50 in our latest report, according to data from the US EIA. Some states are thinking twice. Neighboring Pennsylvania recently terminated its plans to participate in RGGI after years of litigation. Virginia also ended its participation in RGGI after costing energy producers more than $800 million in just 3 years. However, Virginia now plans to reinstate RGGI, despite warnings that such a move would once again increase utility rates. In closing, the General Assembly should seek policies that address energy affordability by unlocking more affordable and reliable energy for families and businesses and keeping megawatts on the grid. This includes ALEC's model Electric Generation Facility Closures and Reliability Act, which prevents the retirement of dispatchable generation before new sources are online and ready to operate. Thank you again for the opportunity to present ALEC's research today.
Thank you. I do not see any questions from my colleagues, so we will call up our unfavorable testimony. We have Brittany Baker from the Chesapeake Climate Action Network.
Thank you, Chair Corman, members of the committee. I'm Brittany Baker from Chesapeake Climate Action Network. To begin, utility bills are high right now because of rising distribution rates, especially by the Exelon-owned utilities, PJM mismanagement, and then also data center forecasts skewing the capacity market auction. RGGI, on the other hand, does not directly affect our utility prices. It is a key part of Maryland's greenhouse gas reduction plan, and passing legislation to remove Maryland from this program would be a mistake. RGGI is a multi-state program that requires fossil fuel power plants, especially the dirtiest ones, to reduce their CO2 emissions through market forces of a cap and trade system. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative's model is an innovative and collaborative way to reduce CO2. The system works so well because it allows the power generators to make an economic decision to either find a way to pollute less or to take more credit so that they can continue to operate and emit the same amount of pollution. Successful cap and trade programs reward innovation, efficiency, early action, and ideally provide strict environmental accountability without inhibiting economic growth. RGGI has always been a bipartisan program. In fact, 3 Republican governors and 5 Democratic governors initiated the program in 2005. Maryland has been in the program since 2007. When the last time a similar bill was proposed like this, which took apart the ability for the MGA and the governor to be decision makers on whether we're in RGGI or not, Governor Hogan's spokesperson, Douglas Mayer, said, Governor Hogan has consistently voiced support and has actively championed the work of RGGI. Therefore, I respectfully request an unfavorable report on HB 66.
Are there any questions? I don't know, you're making me a little nervous that Governor Hogan likes it so much. Okay, that concludes the bill here on House Bill 66. We'll turn to House Bill 460, Delegate Beauchamp, Solar Energy, Construction of Generating Stations in Priority Preservation Areas and Study. And if you have a panel, please bring them up.
Good afternoon. I'm Delegate Barry Beecham from District 38B in Wycomico County. Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 460. The economy on the Eastern Shore and a large part of Maryland is dependent upon the poultry industry. The poultry industry is dependent upon grain farming. Governor Westmore stated just last week at the Taste of Agriculture that farming is the largest economic driver for the state of Maryland. Last year, when legislation was passed altering the requirement to go before a zoning board to change 5% of all farmland in Maryland. I'm sorry, when legislation passed altering the requirement to go before a zoning board to change 5% of all farmland in Maryland. I feel as though it may have been an overreach to disrupt or take a chance of disrupting the economic balance between grain farming and the poultry industry, which would have catastrophic impact on both. The poultry industry imports at present to backfill what Maryland cannot provide. If the poultry industry would be forced to import grain from Western states, not only is the cost going to be significantly increased producing the poultry and other products such as eggs, even Oreo cookies. This will cause a significant cost increase. It also will increase the carbon footprint from hauling. Growing and selling locally will also be affected in a negative way from the installation of solar on agriculturally preserved lands. I am supportive of solar energy. I feel as though we could find a much better place to install solar farms, i.e. medians in the roadways, rooftops of government buildings,
and above any impervious surface. For this reason, I would urge you to vote favorably on House Bill 460 to reduce the 5% allotment down to 2%. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Julie Giordano. I'm the county executive in Wicomico County. In front of you, you have a handout that I provided, and I'm going to explain that handout to you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. I am going to be speaking in the perspective of Wicomico County. This is about economics as much as it is land use. Under the current definition, if you look at your map, the first picture, Wicomico County's priority preservation area totals roughly 180,000 acres. So if you look at the map, you will see the green area. That is our total priority preservation area. At the existing 5% cap, if you turn to the next page, more than 9,000 acres, including thousands of acres of productive farmland, are at risk of permanent conversion. So if you turn to the next page, this is what that 5% looks like in my county. So every little green mark that you see, this is what my landscape is going to look like with this bill. Farming in counties like mine is an economic engine. It supports jobs, local businesses, food security, and a stable tax base that does not demand costly public services. When farmland is replaced with industrial-scale solar, that economic value is lost, often permanently, and surrounding farms become less viable over time. This also affects housing. When preservation land is consumed by large-scale solar, development pressure shifts to fewer parcels, driving up land costs, limiting supply, and making workforce and attainable housing harder to build. That means higher home prices and less flexibility for planned growth. This bill does not oppose solar energy. It restores the balance needed. Reducing the cap from 5 to 2% ensures preservation areas remain preserved and solar development is strategic and not expansive. The required study on solar panel disposal is also critical to avoid future environmental and financial consequences. If the committee is unwilling to reduce the cap, then the definition of priority preservation area has to be corrected. Subdivisions and wetlands should be removed from any percentage that is applied. Leaving them in inflates the acreage and pushes solar onto productive farmland by default. This bill protects farmland, local economies, and still supports clean energy, and I respectfully urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio. I'm here on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau and the 7,000 member families that we represent across the state. We're here in support of the legislation today. As you know, we greatly support the preservation of ag land. We've worked for a long time with this committee to ensure that. And we have about 2 million acres statewide in the priority preservation areas. The Maryland Energy Administration has estimated that we need 35,000 acres to meet our renewable portfolio goals for solar. So at a 2% cap, that still would allow for 43,000 acres. That's far more than what MEA has estimated we would need. So we believe that adjusting the cap to 2% is a reasonable way to meet in the middle to allow solar deployment to continue, but also to be conscious of ag land preservation. I'm also here on behalf of Worcester County, similar to Wicomico County, with a 5% cap. It's over 10,000 acres just for Worcester County alone. So at 2%, we would still have 4,000 acres available to contribute toward the RPS solar goals. We also very much support the study. Decommissioning is a really important issue and a really important consideration that we believe we should be looking at as we continue to grow in this area. So with that, on behalf of both clients, we urge your favorable report and thank you for your consideration.
Good afternoon. I'm Carol Bean from the Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, also here in support of House Bill 460. For more than 30 years now, we just had our 35th anniversary. The Eastern Shore Land Conservancy has worked with farmers and landowners and local governments with a primary focus or main focus to protect working lands and the natural resources that kind of define the Eastern Shore. We do, like everyone here, sort of support the commitment to renewable energy and do think every county needs to do its part. Open land is one of the resources that we have. So it's not surprising that solar developers look to the Eastern Shore and to our farmland to develop. But we do think the shift to the 2% for all the reasons that have been stated for how important this agricultural land is to the economy of the Eastern Shore. But I think it's also another concern for us. These priority preservation areas were by design created to strategically guide our restoration programs like Rural Legacy that we use to do conservation easements. So it's using it to guide our conservation work. That's where we've decided as a state we want to invest conservation. And I think including these kind of conservation areas as part of the acreage in these priority preservation areas will, one, kind of disincentivize conservation in the exact areas that we want to be doing it. And it also, I think, will inflate the pressure on existing farmland. So I think not, including the acres that have been conserved in this area that we've designated for conservation is something maybe we should just be looking at and considering. And I think, these by design are protecting the prime farm soils. Which is incredibly important as we're losing a lot of more marginal soils, particularly on the Eastern Shore. And so it makes that prime soils, which is what we have in priority preservation areas, it's going to make those areas even more important to protect and have available for agricultural uses. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Bruce Beriano. I'm here on behalf of Queen Anne's County, Caroline County. I also have the honor of representing the county executive of Wicomico County. I'm not going to repeat everything that was said, but I really want to touch your emotions and your feelings, because I think what was done last year was just overkill. It was just overreach. And we all live in Maryland. We love Maryland because it's so unique. Seriously, it is. I love the Eastern Shore, and I'm from the Bronx, New York. Really, I love the Eastern Shore. And the legislation passed really takes away too much valuable, diverse land on the Eastern Shore that is such a unique part of the characteristic of Maryland, American miniature. And as Sid indicated, it's just too much. It is beautiful to see farmland. It is beautiful to promote that very important industry in our state. And there are tremendous consequences economically, as was set forth, that are going to be very harmful by having such a large acreage percentage. Really urge you to reconsider that. Clearly, the study is needed regardless. That is critical. But I really think that we've acted too quickly in the amount of acreage that you've thrust upon the Eastern Shore counties. And in respect to the Eastern Shore and even parts of Western Maryland, which is all a part of Maryland. We're all Marylanders. Let's keep the beauty and the diversity and the magnificence of our state. I really mean that. You're right around the Eastern Shore. I don't want the Eastern Shore to just look like a solar panel. I really don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You'll be happy to know the Ag Reserve in Montgomery County also doesn't want to look like one big solar panel. So we are one Maryland, and happy birthday to the committee's candy man.
Thank you very much.
Let's make room up there for Lindsay Thompson from the Maryland Grain Producers, Grayson Middleton from the Delmarva Chicken Association, and Anna Griffith from Forever Maryland before we take any questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Lindsay Thompson here today on behalf of the Maryland Grain Producers Association in very excited support of this legislation. Just to give a little background, this 5% of the priority preservation area was implemented last year in Senate Bill, I think it was 931, right? But I do think that this was a new concept, and it was a recognition by the legislature that there should be some limits on the amount of acreage in these priority preservation areas that should be going into solar. This bill would reduce that percentage from 5% down to 2%. And that doesn't say that no county can't have more than 2%, right? Just the local planning and zoning authority would kick back in, and the PSC would not be able to override that decision with a CPCN once they reach that 2%. I think this is really important for us to consider because our rural communities are seeing, I think, a disproportionate impact or pressure in meeting these statewide renewable energy goals. In Maryland, more than 60% of our acreage that is currently and actively farmed is actually rented. So the farmer does not own that land. And we are directly competing with the solar industry for those land rents. I get no less than 4 letters a week to my farm mailbox from solar companies offering upwards of $4,500 an acre per year. That's just not something that a grain farmer, and especially not a new and beginning grain farmer, could ever compete with. To give you an idea, at most, we're looking at about $200 an acre. And for every acre that is taken out of agricultural production, you're not just impacting that family farm, it has a 7-fold impact on the local economy. And so, as others have said, we're not anti-solar. We don't want those that want to be able to put solar in not to be able to do that. We're just looking for some reasonable limits and protection for rural Maryland and for Maryland grain farmers.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Anna Mudd Griffith, and I'm the Senior Policy Director for Potomac Conservancy. We are one of the region's leading clean water advocates with over 42,000 members in the Potomac watershed, most of them living here in Maryland. But today I'm here on behalf of Forever Maryland, which is a coalition of nearly 30 land trusts located in every region around the state. We just want to offer some brief testimony in strong support of House Bill 460, which will reduce the burden of solar development on Maryland's priority preservation areas, which are so critical for achieving our state's broader land conservation goals. We look forward to continuing to work with stakeholders to support the responsible solar siting and development of this industry, and we urge the committees to issue a favorable report for House Bill 460. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Grayson Middleton here on behalf of Delmarva Chicken Association. I just wanted to highlight a couple things from our end. Obviously, when grain production is impacted on the Eastern Shore, it can raise prices. We are then required to import more grain, which comes in at a higher cost, and also because it has to be transported, it has a higher carbon footprint. The Maryland Energy Administration has stated repeatedly that they require between 18 to 20,000 acres of solar development on farmland. The 5% or the 2% cap would allow for 21,000 acres of solar siting under the jurisdiction of the PSC on the Eastern Shore alone. We put this forward last year, and I think that things had to be rushed in order to get the legislation passed. But we believe that this cap is more than reasonable and does not in any way limit the amount of solar that we can have on the Eastern Shore, just simply putting that cap there so that it can then go back to the local jurisdictions. Thank you, and we support this bill.
Thank you. Any questions for Delegate Beecham or the other witnesses? Delegate Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Beecham. Wycomico County Executive, you touched on something that's very important, because it may, hopefully, might even turn into an amendment somewhere down the road. But could you please explain to the panel the difference between the land that the law said was available versus the land that is available, and that under the current law, maybe 10% of Wycomico County farmland would be covered, not 5%?
Yes. Yes, sir. Thank you. And actually, do you want to add in that too?
Sure.
Sure. Go ahead. And I'll explain the map too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually 27,000 acres is actually what's available, and 9,000 acres could be put in solar panels in our county, and
so
that's just devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, the numbers don't match.
So if you look at the map, if you look at the map that I gave you, the green area on the map, and I know I had to rush through that, that is our entire preservation priority area per the state's definition. What is not included in that, if you go to the second map, you will see all the white areas that have been taken out. Those are the protected lands, so the wetlands, critical areas and things like that. What also isn't included on this is developments that are already there. So if you were to redefine priority preservation, my ask would be to remove the amount of wetlands that are already there, because you're not going to build solar on those or critical areas, to remove the development, so that the 180,000 acres is really going to shrink down. So if you kept it at 5, I would at least ask for the definition of priority preservation area to change and not look at it holistically from the county, because it's not realistic, because solar can't go everywhere. But what we did on the second map was show you what 9,000 acres looks like on a possible 60-acre parcel. And I am going to tell you, the people of Wicomico County do not want their county to look like this. And I would hope that every single person here would not want my county to look like that, or any county here in Maryland. I hope that helps. Delegate.
Thank you. Also, another question, maybe for the grain producers. We heard earlier today that solar panel construction is a net jobs gain. That Maryland gains jobs by installing solar panels. Could you talk a little bit about the ag industry in Maryland, and that just because we have a cleared field, it may be farmland, but there's no farm without the industry?
Absolutely. So that goes to my comment around, for every acre that is taken out of agricultural production, there is estimated to be a 7-fold impact on the local economy. So you're not just seeing the loss of income to that individual farmer derived from whatever the crop is on that acre, but you also have their seed salesmen, their fertilizer salesmen, their agronomist, the agricultural equipment operators. Grayson spoke to the need to import grain for the poultry industry. And so those are perpetual jobs, perpetual income, perpetual tax base for the state that you're not seeing with solar installation, which is a come in, install, and leave, right? So I think we're really looking at more long-term jobs and economic impact.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much, Delegate Beecham, for the bill. I just wanted to ask your thoughts and ideas about the proposal in your bill to have MDE study the environmental impacts of disposal of solar photovoltaics. But the Climate Solutions Now Act in 2022 created a work group. Are you familiar with that? And if you are, what would your bill look to do differently, or is there another subject area that they would be looking at as it relates to the reuse at the end of the life of a solar?
Basically, what I'm looking at is the impact of removing the acreage from these farms. To me, that's the impact. The impact is that we have 9,200 acres in Wicomico County, and in Worcester County we have like 9,700. Taking that out of production is what I really feel like is it's just totally unacceptable.
I hear that, but your bill looks at the environmental impact of the disposal of a solar panel system at the end of its life cycle. So is it the land or the actual solar panel, and what to do with that panel? Actually, both.
I mean, what do you do with a solar panel when it's exhausted its life? I mean, it ends up on a landfill. PFAS. From some of the things I've read, it also expels PFAS over time. These are things that we've already experienced and had issues with, and we don't need more of that.
I certainly understand and hear what you're saying, but there is this work group, and I just would want to know how your research would differ from the research that has already been done, so I can help clarify what you want in this bill. I appreciate it.
And more specifically, Delegate, I just texted you the link to the work group report that goes through exactly what Section 2 of your bill is after. So you were, I guess, ahead of the curve. You didn't even know the question's already been answered. And so you can take a look at that and see if you want any bills to implement that report. It might be of interest. Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I've heard a lot of comments today that I hear in my district that they really, majority of people live over there don't want to see that amount of solar panels all over their counties. And that seems to be, all over all of my 4 counties that I represent. It's not that people are opposed to solar, but they don't want to see that much of it. So what I think Grayson talked about the grain that's produced and the grain that's needed. And Lindsay, you may be helpful in this too, but what we I mean, what the state's, I think under 5% is 102,000, something like that roughly, that this would bring into effect. What the state requires, 35,000, and what 2% is 43,000 acres under this bill. So under the current scenario on the shore for the poultry industry by itself, we're not raising enough right now grain. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. We are importing grain right now, and that's before any, solar development started happening. So we've been doing that for a while, and those are due to various pressures, but development of a lot of, of different kinds, basically.
So where's the majority of this import coming from?
Out west, Illinois, I mean, whoever has it at the time. At Illinois, any of the Midwestern states.
And how's it get here?
Rail.
On rail?
Yes, sir.
And so percentage-wise, now, what would you guess is being imported?
Delegate, I had that figure, but I can't remember what it is. And it's Lindsay might know.
40%.
Okay.
And it costs $1.20 a bushel to have it trucked in here.
40% is being imported now to meet the need of the current poultry industry.
Approximately, depending on the year, because production obviously fluctuates with crop rotations, but on average.
Rough numbers is good. So under that's now. If we get to 5%, if we raise this to 5% on the shore, what percentage would have to be imported by rail?
So if you took, just on the eastern shore, if you took an additional 21,000 acres out, which was the 5%, correct? Just for corn, you're looking at about 7.5 million bushels additional. I'm not a mathematician, so I can get back to you on the percentage, but that would be the approximate bushels.
$5 bushel would be 35 million.
Do you know how many, I hate to put you on the spot, you know how many bushels are being imported now?
No, but I will get you that answer.
Okay. I mean, it'd be helpful. I really want to try and put this in perspective of what this means to the shore when we're not producing and what means it gets there. The choo-choo train's not running on electricity, so I just want to make certain everybody understands.
Well, and Delegate, I have an Excel sheet that actually lays out all that information, but what I can tell you is that it equates to approximately $63 million in grain purchases over the course of a growing cycle.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate, but no shade on the choo-choo trains, please. Delegate Ziegler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to ask about corn prices, which from my perspective are unsustainably low. And thank God that Delmarva is a grain deficit area, and sometimes we have a positive basis. But certainly this year was a really bumper crop for, I think, almost everybody. And, the problem is you can barely afford to grow corn with where inputs are and where costs are. So I'm just not sure about the idea of importing grain from out west, how that could be cost effective, and how much lower you could expect the price of corn to go and still have people willing to produce it.
Yeah, so I think that if the poultry industry could source 100% of their grain here locally, they absolutely would. We are actually a grain deficit area. And when I talk about us, I'm talking about Delmarva, right, as the operating area for the poultry industry. So we only produce in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia about 60% of the demand that is needed to feed the poultry industry every year, right? That means that we actually do enjoy a positive basis most times. Well, you're on the western shore, so on the eastern shore, we do. But to Delegate Beecham's point, for them to rail it in from the Midwest out of necessity, it does cost over $1 generally a bushel for them to do that. The issue that we are seeing here with low commodity prices is the inability for our farmers to compete with the rental rates that are being offered by solar companies. And it makes it really difficult, like you said, to continue production.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to talk about any choo-choo trains, but I'm going to talk about planes, Mr. Chair. So this is probably for the county executive. I'm looking at the handy map that we've got here of Wicomico County, and I see kind of, sort of in the middle, the Salisbury Regional Airport. I've had some issues in my district. In my district, we have Martin State Airport. There are some proposed solar sites very close to the airport. The FAA has actually stepped in and said, wait a minute, this could be a problem if we start loading up all kinds of solar because of the glare risk to planes. So, Madam County Executive, I'm just curious, have any of those conversations happened in Wicomico County? Is anyone thinking about that? Because, I mean, one of these sites is like almost right on the airport. I have real concern with a site putting it right on the airport there.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So actually, we are one of the airports that actually has a solar farm actually right next door. But flight patterns and things like that were taken into consideration for that exact reason. So yes, I mean, you bring up a good point, but the solar farm that currently is there now is actually not an issue for the flights coming in.
Mr. Chair, may I have a follow-up? So what happens if someone proposes a solar farm in an area that is an issue to planes? What authority would you have to stop it at that point?
Right. Well, we wouldn't have any, honestly. So if it falls within the priority preservation area and we are under that current 5%, so under 9,000 acres, my planning and zoning department has literally no authority. Now, with it being the FAA, obviously the federal government may step in, state of Maryland loves when they do that. So, so we would see what would happen, with the FAA. But as of right now, the FAA has not had those conversations with me as the executive at that point. The one that is near the airport at this point in time has not caused an issue. But yes, you are correct. We wouldn't have, our planning and zoning would have literally zero part of that at all. It would be between the federal government and the state government at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, delegate preemption rolls downhill. So the feds preempt the state just like the state can preempt the local. So if the FAA said no good, then it's no good. They're in control around airports. Yeah. Any additional questions for the sponsor of this panel? Okay, thank you, Delegate Beecham. Thanks to your panel.
Thank you.
We'll call up a couple unfavorable witnesses, Leah Meredith, Solar Industry Association, and Robin Dutta from Chesa.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Robin Dutta with the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association. You have my written testimony. I'm just going to be very brief. The Renewable Energy Certainty Act, which the General Assembly passed last year, was the product of multiple years of pretty intense work. I know discussions within 2023 Solar Task Force, as well as numerous side and central conversations with any number of stakeholders. We believe that the work that that law provide, the work done on it, provides good balance. It balances local authorities. It balances property owners' rights, land conservation, and the needs of Maryland Energy, which is that Maryland is requiring a lot more energy. So we certainly support solar on rooftops, on carports, ground mounts. We support making sure that solar is best placed to help Maryland and help meet Maryland's energy needs. The work done with the Renewable Energy Certainty Act last year, we think was a very good compromise and strikes a balance across a number of different issues. And so we urge an unfavorable report on this bill, HB 460. Thank you.
Members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide unfavorable testimony in House Bill 460. Again, I'm Leah Meredith, Mid-Atlantic Regional Director of SEIA, or the Solar Energy Industries Association. 75% of the 5,000 Marylanders employed by the solar industry work in the project development and installation sector. The health of Maryland's solar industry and its ability to bring much-needed new electricity generation online is thus dependent upon being able to cost-effectively build solar projects on the land of willing property owners. I'm addressing this committee wearing two of my hats, one as a representative of the solar industry and the second as a third-generation caretaker of several acres of Talbot County agricultural land that is designated farmland of statewide importance. And I hope I don't offend my industry colleagues when I say on the record that the stewardship of that land is my greatest privilege. The development of any and every solar project starts with a willing landowner, and in the case of large-scale solar projects, often involves several willing landowners to host not just the solar arrays themselves, but the necessary infrastructure for the project to be able to connect on the grid. While hosting a solar project is not a good fit for my acreage of priority preservation land for a variety of reasons, Maryland property owners should be trusted to make the decision that is best for their land, just as I have done, and in determining whether to enter into a lease with a solar developer. There's also many technical and practical considerations on where solar can go. It can't just go anywhere. The most important one is being able to interconnect if the area of that grid is hosting. So everyone that gets a flyer in the mail doesn't necessarily have suitable land for hosting solar. It's just the solar developers casting a very extremely wide net. My gratitude to this committee is I will actually soon be stepping away from my solar industry role to solely focus on the needs of my family's farm. You have a vitally important, challenging task ahead of you. I respectfully request that you issue an unfavorable report on House Bill 460.
And good luck to you in your future endeavors. Do we have any questions for the panelists? Delegate Anderson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your testimony was you think the current law is fair and accurate. In our county, by the map, by the new law, we only have about 30,000 acres of farmland in Somerset County. By the way the current law is written today, you can put 9,000 acres of that in solar before our county government has anything to say about it. You can take 33% of our farmland without our county government having any say in it at all. I don't think that's fair, sir. I actually think you're preying on the poorest people in the state, because you're going to the cheapest land. They're preying on the cheapest land they can buy. And I think that's disproportionate to the state. Do you see any remedy for that?
With respect, sir, one, when solar is built, it's done so through a contract with the landowner. So they're choosing to go solar. Nobody's forcing them to go solar.
And I'm a property rights guy. I hate to cut you off. And I believe a man should be able to do what he wants.
And a woman.
But when it starts to, we don't let people build battery plants or landfills wherever they want. The community has an input because it changes the character of the community. And that's what I'm asking you. When you get to that saturation, do you have any idea on how we could implement something without a law like this to help change that?
I mean, for any project over 2 megawatts, it does already go through the state's CPCN process, which local governments have, a large voice at the table there, as well as other stakeholders. And this was a robust discussion last year with county stakeholders, environmental stakeholders, obviously, the industry being part of it as well. There can only be kind of economically so much concentration of solar in any one place. As we were talking about on one of the previous bills, interconnection costs, the ability to build a system economically, there's only so much you can do at any one place. It's also the demand of energy as it's increasing everywhere. can make it economical and beneficial for everyone to do so. And, for those who might be, lower income and large landowners, oftentimes solar leases for those larger projects are set income that they then receive every year. And so that can actually, in our belief, help them not just have predictable income every year, and these are contracts that can run, 20 or 30 years. They can borrow off of that. It's not based on the solar production, it's based on leasing that land. And so we think that can help them very much. And what we hope to add to the land and add to the community.
Okay, I do not see any further questions. That concludes the bill hearing on House Bill 460. We'll turn to House Bill 540, our friend Delegate Lehman, Public Service Company Transparency Act. I think we just heard a lot about this on the floor, so.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I have a panel of four, Brittany Baker, Sophia Gilroy, David Lapp, and Laurel Peltier. I'll squeeze in up here. I do not see Mr. Lapp yet. I hope he will be joining us. In any case, good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Guyton, and esteemed members of ENT. It's great to be back here before you so soon. For the record, I'm Delegate Mary Lehman, and I am here to request a favorable report with sponsor amendments on House Bill 540, investor-owned electric, gas and electric companies, utility rate changes, also subtitled the Public Service Company Transparency Act. You should have an interdelineated copy with my amendments in the bill file. Maryland electric and gas ratepayers are reeling as their monthly bills have increased by a staggering 44% since 2020. There are many reasons for rising gas and electric utility costs, but they, I believe, are exacerbated by the lack of customer awareness on how to engage with the Public Service Commission and a lack of transparency around PSC proceedings that lead to rate increases. To make Marylanders more aware what the PSC is, how to engage with the Commission, participate in rate cases, and make their voices heard, this bill has three key components for utilities. First, all gas and electric utilities, investor-owned as well as municipal utilities and cooperatives, must include in each retail customer paper bill and automatic payment email a paragraph describing the PSC and its regulatory role and directing them on how to participate in and observe a proceeding by finding information on the Commission's website. Secondly, for investor-owned electric and gas utilities, they must notify customers of any proceeding that they file with the PSC that could result in a rate change and state that more details about the specific proceeding are or will be posted on the PSC's website. Third, when an investor-owned utility notifies customers of a proceeding, it also must provide that portion of the PSC's most recent annual rate report that pertains to that specific utility's 10-year rate trend. So these requirements are meant to make ratepayers aware that they have a say in how their rates may be affected and to give ratepayers both the time and the tools to engage the PSC with respect to potential rate changes. Additionally, all electric and gas utilities must distribute annually to each retail customer a bill insert that includes that company's annual rate report and must also post the rate report on that company's website. Finally, on or before January 1st of 2028, and then every January 1st going forward, the PSC, working with the Office of People's Counsel, must develop and publish on its website an annual rate report for each public service company operating in Maryland on its website. The annual rate report must describe in non-technical terms the rate and a 10-year trend identifying costs of transmission, distribution, and standard offer commodity service, and account for all customer bill line items, and that includes rate riders. The Commission shall use information provided by the utility companies in its own customer bill inserts. Finally, OPC is required to bring a case to the Commission if it determines that an annual rate report published by the Commission has incomplete or incorrect information. I do have amendments that I referred to earlier, and those came through conversations with PEPCO and BGE, the Office of People's Counsel, and the Public Service Commission. Those amendments mainly are clarifying. Others strike language that is either duplicative or too descriptive, and one that requires that informational paragraph I described about what the PSC is to appear on all gas and electric utility ratepayers' bills, including those of municipal systems and cooperatives. In conclusion, please view this bill as an important form of consumer education, protection, and engagement on a critical pocketbook issue that will allow ratepayers to use their voice more effectively in proceedings before the PSC. I respectfully ask for your favorable report. Thank you. And if I could ask Mr. Lapp to go next.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, members of the committee. David Lapp for the Office of People's Counsel in enthusiastic support of HB 540. Customers deserve accurate and data-driven information about the costs of their utility service. Rather than factual information, too often utility customers get sound bites or cherry-picked data that are intended to manipulate public discourse rather than provide objective information. Before energy affordability became a hot topic, in June 2024, we produced our rates report showing how distribution rates and charges had changed since 2010 for each of the major utilities in the state, including how BGE's gas distribution rates had tripled and PEPCO and Delmarva's electric rates more than doubled. Before our report, there was no repository for the rates and charges customers pay on their utility bills, and that shows how they have changed over time. These changes occur piecemeal through many utility proceedings. We had to painstakingly go through many dockets for each utility to pull together this information. The docketed information is not subject to dispute, but it is not centralized, not tracked over time, and not readily available in any form. It took our office significant resources to pull the data together. Before our report, customers, policymakers, and the media were unaware of how rates have been changing. Remarkably, even PSC commissioners appeared surprised at how much rates had increased since 2010. We continue to document how rates are changing, but it shouldn't be up to our office. The Commission and the utilities have this basic factual information, and it should be shared with customers in a regular and transparent way. HB 540 will help customers see for themselves what services they're actually paying for on their utility bill and how those costs have changed over the previous decade. We ask for a favorable report.
Ms. Baker next. Thank you.
Hello, Brittany Baker, Maryland Director of Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Chair Corman and members of the committee, we are very supportive of this important bill that's going to increase transparency and help to educate consumers on how their rates are changing over time. We know that the investor-owned utilities need a little bit more direction about consumer education right now, because just recently, this past weekend, they spent $6,000 to $8,000 doing customer education as Super Bowl ads about their legislative priorities. This bill will not immediately lower rates, but it will require utilities to share graphics depicting change in rates over time and information about how ratepayers can make their voice heard at the PSC. And this will be a deterrent for utilities to increase rates so frequently. Therefore, Chesapeake Climate Action Network urges a favorable report.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Sophia Gilroy. I'm a policy associate with Maryland PIRG, the statewide public interest advocacy organization. We work to find common ground around common sense solutions that will help ensure a healthier, safer, more secure future. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of House Bill 540. This bill adds more transparency to utility costs and trends, helps educate the public about their energy bills, and provides valuable data directly to customers when a utility requests a rate hike. The Office of the People's Counsel has been doing some of this work already, and having the Public Service Commission engage will add additional resources and attention. Requiring the publication of rate trend reports will improve consumers' understanding of what parts of their bills are rising and how rates have changed over time. This is particularly important because many Marylanders are facing rapidly rising delivery rates, far outpacing inflation, with little consumer understanding of how much delivery rates have risen in comparison to supply. This committee is well aware of some of these trends. For example, in Maryland in 1984, 61% of each gas bill paid for the gas itself, and 39% paid for delivery. In the early 2010s, that split reversed. Today, 62% of your bill pays for delivery. These decade-long trends provide critical context for utility rate hike proceedings. Utilities are regulated by the state, with the legislature and the PSC overseeing the company's operations and controlling how much utilities are authorized to profit. It's therefore of utmost importance that utility rates and the rate-making process happen with clear guidelines and with robust transparency. This bill helps in that effort. We respectfully request a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. As a ratepayer, I started looking at bills in 2018, and as an advocate, I've probably looked at 4,000 to 5,000 utility bills and helped 4,000 to 5,000 people. I can tell you that 10 people could tell me what the rates are. And if I asked you right now, I don't want to put you on the spot, do you know what your supply rate is, your delivery rate, even the usage? Nobody really knows it. The truth of the matter is we have very little information about our rates, and I encourage you to Google right now what your utilities rate is. I did it just now, and SMECO, which has 165,000 accounts, prominently displayed their supply rate on the front page. What's so good about this bill as a true consumer help is that this would be state verified, consistent, clear, factual data on what people are paying for a pretty large bill, especially if you're a limited income family. It's your number 2 bill behind rent. So this data is impossible to find. And people don't even know who the Public Service Commission is. They don't know who the Office of People's Counsel is. So how are they going to find this? And it just provides a really clear structure so that our consumers, 2.3 million households, can actually participate in a market that is really built for them. They would know who to participate with, where to find the data, and once a year they would get this really cool chart like they do in Maine that says, here are your rates and here's what's happened over the last 10 years. So this is not expensive, and this is data that our state should have been producing long time ago. So thank you for your time and much approval on this terrific bill. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question, Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to the young lady from PERC, you talked about the percentages flipping. What is that in absolute numbers? I mean, you could the percentages could flip, but that could mean one thing costs less than the other than it would have before. So I want to not just the percentage, but the dynamic of how things changed over that period of time. Prices went up across everything, but they went up faster in one area than another, or what?
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So I can share with you after this a Future of Heat primer on this issue. And to talk about long-term trends, gas prices over time fluctuate wildly, but consistently the delivery rates have increased over time. And that's across gas utilities in Maryland.
And that is that in excess of the general inflation rate over time, over the same period of time?
For many utilities, but not for all. And I think that David can.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll just add that those percentages, I mean, what we see with distribution rates is this constant increase. So today, supply costs are about $2 for every $3 when they were $1 of every $3. But of course, that changes because the commodity price of gas, and we're talking gas bills, but it also applies on the electric side because gas is the primary source of generation in PJM. So that supply cost goes up and down. So what we see often is presentations about increased supply costs that pick a low point and compare it to a high point. But the reality is that that breakdown in percentage is going to change every year because the supply cost goes up and down. But the distribution cost is constantly rising, or has been for most of all the Exelon utilities in Maryland. It's been increasing at a very, very fast pace, but it's little bit by little bit. It doesn't have the big jumps, but it's always going up.
Well, I mean, inflation is always going up too, so is it outpacing inflation in general?
Well, like BGE's gas rates have increased since 2010 at 3 times the rate of inflation.
I'm talking about the part that you say keeps going up. Is it going up faster than inflation or not?
I'm sorry, I violated my own. The gas delivery rates, distribution rates for BGE have increased 3 times the rate of inflation since 2010. The Exelon electric utilities, Delmarva and Pepco have increased about double the rate of inflation.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, Potomac Edison has been flat. And the point to remember with utility service is that they don't have to increase at the rate of inflation, because if utilities are pacing their investments at an appropriate pace, rates don't have to go up at all, because certain assets that are in rate base are depreciating, which means they're fully paid off while they're adding new assets. That's why Potomac Edison's rates have essentially been constant for 25 years. So they've been increased at well below the rate of inflation. And that's the way, utility operations used to more normally be, is they increase slowly because the fixed costs are spread out and new assets are acquired at a similar pace as old assets are retired or fully depreciated, and there may be changes in consumption that address costs as well. So,
Delegate Baylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for the bill. We've talked a lot about distribution and supply costs in this committee so far. Is this bill kind of solely focused on the distribution side, or is it going to also include things like transmission and other things in there? I would be curious if David or the sponsor could expound on that.
I'm happy to respond. It covers distribution, transmission, and generation supply costs. And it's really important, you need to have all 3 of those categories, because otherwise you're like, it's like a grocery bill that only includes part of what you're buying at the grocery store. And it's also important to, the supply costs, although that's not where the utilities gain most of their profits, they are responsible for procuring the generation for customers who don't shop, which is basically almost all customers today. And the utilities also earn a little bit of profit off of the supply portion of the bill. So it is appropriate, for customers to know the utilities bear some responsibility for that through the regulated procurements that they do for standard offer service for electricity and default service for gas. And utilities are the primary driver of increasing transmission costs are costs that are driven by local utilities. They're called local projects, and they evade really effective, meaningful cost review, and they are initiated and paid for by they are initiated by the local utility, BGE, for example, and they apply to BGE customers, so they're paid for by the utilities customers.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add quickly, Delegate Baylor, thank you for the question. As I mentioned, I did have what I think was a constructive conversation with PEPCO and BGE in my office, got good constructive feedback, made a few tweaks to the bill as a result, but that's one of the issues they raised, that, why should we have to report transmission and standard offer commodity service and all those other things when we really are only responsible for distribution. But as Mr. Lapp said, that would only present part of the picture of the bill if we focus just on the distributions. We have to have a complete picture of what, adds up to these bills that folks are seeing.
Thank you.
Delegate Morgan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Doug. Good to see you again over here. I think you used to sit somewhere in this area. Good to be here. I'm looking at the PSC letter. Could you explain how you feel regarding paragraphs 2 and 3, where they say the utility must provide the notice to the commission 30 days prior, then there's a proposed rate increase period for 180 days, so they go through a whole bunch of things about being published across the board. So it seems on its face that this is already being done through the PSC.
Are you looking at the fiscal note, or what are you looking at?
No, the Public Service Commission letter that was sent over here by Chairman Parvey.
There are requirements for filing for a rate case. This bill does, those filing requirements do not include the information that this bill would require, for one. The bill also requires information to be posted on the commission website to be shared with customers, and none of that information is available. This information really for the first time became available to the public when we compiled it, our office, in 2024, and we've maintained that, but it has not been available. Most people have not been aware at how rates have changed over time. And it's not part of the filing requirements in a rate case. This would fix that.
Could they go to your website and find this information?
No, they could not. They could go to our OPC's website.
That's what I'm saying. Could they go to the OPC website?
They could go to our website. We are trying to, keep it maintained and up to date.
Okay, then you had stated previously, Mr. Lapp, about the costs. Why wouldn't the letter contain all of the costs? Not just the 2 or 3 that you mentioned, but all costs on a utility bill?
Well, when they come in for a rate increase, it's just distribution rates, so that it doesn't include the rest of what customers pay on their bill. It doesn't include that. And it also only includes information. It's also often very hard to understand about the increase in rates. It doesn't say what existing rates are or what the revenue requirement is of the utility. It's basically a somewhat hard to read. I mean, it includes some information, and utilities provide some information. Sometimes we think it's not very clear, and in some cases it misrepresents.
But are you sort of picking and choosing are you sort of picking and choosing what information you want to have in the letter rather than identifying every cost that the consumer is paying and identifying that appropriately?
No, this bill intends to cover all the utilities costs.
Okay, then my last question is, Doug Lamy, you're okay with the fact that for the utilities to do this, they're going to charge us back to the customers as part of their rates?
Could you ask that again, Delegate?
I'm saying that you're okay then, if the utility is forced to do this, that will be a cost that will be pushed back to the ratepayer.
All I can do is refer you to the fiscal note, which says there definitely the reporting requirements of the PSC and OPC's role in that could be handled with their existing, budgeted resources. And yeah, I mean, I do know that you're going to hear from some of the utilities about how they would, would handle that cost. But to go back to your question about websites and who's posting what, just to be clear, the utilities have to post on their own websites information, annual reporting information, and then the PSC would also provide that along with that those 10-year rate trends for each of the individual utilities, and those utilities would also have to have that 10-year rate trend on the report, as well as put it out anytime. And I do want to clarify, it's not just when they're going for a rate increase, it's any proceeding that could potentially result in a rate increase. The bill is clear about that. So there could be other proceedings where they're not specifically going for a rate increase, but they end up resulting in one. And I was asked this question by either Pepco or BGE with respect to a bill. I guess Delegate Charkoudian got passed a year or two ago, a geothermal bill, and they said, so you're saying, for example, with that proceeding, we would also have to post that information. I said, yes, that's the way the bill reads that way for a reason.
Okay, then I'll read from you the PSC letter. It says, in terms of the bill's impact on ratepayers, it is likely the bill would lead to increased expenses being included in customers' rates. Utilities are permitted to recover the rates at reasonable costs associated with the rate case and a reasonable cost incurred to provide got my glasses on here. To recover rates from the reasonable costs associated with the rate case and the reasonable costs incurred to provide informational advertising to its customers. Because the bill requires the utility to provide various notices via printed inserts or bill statements, the cost of producing those inserts would be included in the expenses the utility recovers from its ratepayers. That's from the PSC letter. So it's going to be a cost that the ratepayer will have to pay essentially at the end of the day for this notification to go out.
I mean, I think that's generally accurate. They're entitled to recover their costs. This is the utilities, when they don't like something, they generally come in with some pretty high costs compared to the costs that customers are experiencing, the increases in the hundreds of millions of dollars and, from capital investments each year. This is a very, very small cost, yet it's very important for customers to have this information because, frankly, customers are getting a lot of confusing information and misleading information about the causes of high bills today. This is a very relatively low cost way to help customers keep customers informed relative to, the massive rate increases that we've been seeing.
Thank you.
So let me just ask you, we had a really good bipartisan idea on the floor the other day of just including the hyperlink. So would it be possible that one time we make all the utilities, I think you want to include the munis as well, just change their programming. So at the bottom of the bill, it says, learn more about the Public Service Commission who regulates your utilities, tiny URL here, learn more about the rate history, tiny URL here. And then that's it. That's a one-time change. And then they just have to update a website. You can't tell me updating a website is going to cost that much money. Do you think that might work as a compromise based on Delegate Aracon's idea on the floor?
Is that?
You don't have to decide now. Just give it some thought.
That was a long lead-up statement to, I'm trying to follow. What part of it was the question?
We'll talk more about it in subcommittee. That's all right. Delegate Grammer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 540 gives the Office of the People's Counsel the power to challenge the PSC's own annual rate report, but the Office of the People's Counsel role today is to represent customers and request PSC action, not to actually police their decisions. How does this bill avoid creating confusion about who actually has authority over rate cases, and why should we risk blurring the lines between the Public Service Commission, the Office of the People's Counsel, and the courts?
Well, I think the role of the PSC is very clear in this. Actually, the only time OPC, I think, is mentioned specifically is where it talks about the PSC has to consult with the OPC about the rates and the 10-year rate study. I don't think it's unclear at all, but I'd ask Mr. Lapp to address that as well.
Yeah, our role, we are the state consumer advocate, and sometimes that means, sometimes it means agreeing with the utilities. We're not always just anti-utility. It may come across that way sometimes, but certainly sometimes we agree with the utilities, sometimes we agree with the commission, and sometimes we disagree with the commission. So part of our responsibility is to challenge commission decisions, and we do. We a couple years ago, we got one of the first substantive appellate court decisions overturning a decision of the Public Service Commission in appellate court, and that's part of our job. That's a big lift because there's extreme deference given to the Public Service Commission, but we do, just like the utilities do, we can challenge decisions at the commission in the courts. That's part of our role.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I think the first time there's a mention of the OPC is on page 3 of the bill, paragraph D, where it says on or before January 1, 2028, and each January 1 thereafter, the commission in consultation with the Office of People's Counsel will develop and publish this annual report, and then this specifically breaks out what has to be in the report and the 10-year rate change.
Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thank you for bringing the bill. I'm asking you this question because I don't think there's any opposition or informational testimony in person following you. I could be wrong. But just, again, reading the informational testimony from the utilities, one of them is actually in opposition, the rest are informational, although the informational testimony reads as opposition. But the number one concern sounds like there's some logistical and procedural concerns and also concerns about cost. And you said you've had very productive conversations with them. In any of those conversations, they tell you how much they expect this to cost them?
No, I did. We did get into that a little bit, and the representative from BGE, Mr. Andes, who I've known for a long time, I worked well with over the years, dating back to my county council days, he expressed concern about the cost and made some reference, not in terms of dollar figures, but I said, are we talking, do you think thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions? And he said, well, I'm not really sure yet. And I inadvertently thought that he misunderstood and thought that he was indicating there was already a fiscal note out yet, and there was not at the time. So I don't know what they think it might cost. I have not heard any details with respect to that.
I found it odd that there was no cost in there, but yeah, no, I wonder how much that cost compares to running ads during the Super Bowl. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Okay, I do not see any further questions. That concludes the bill hearing. Thank you. Do we have any subcommittee announcements? Delegate Lewis, do you have an announcement? Chair Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Transportation Subcommittee of Environment and Transportation will meet this Thursday, February 12th at 4 p.m. or after committee hearings end. Stay tuned for announcements and updates. Thank you.
Chair Boyce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Given we've been here and need some time, I'd say 3:40. The Natural Resources Subcommittee will meet at 3:40 online. We'll only discussing 2 bills. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all very much. Have a productive rest of your day.